creator of the universe and embodiment of divine wisdom and light, we come before you with thanksgiving and praise. May your will be done in our nation as it is in the heavens. Please bless our political leader, party officials, activists, and all the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Give us the grace to always see good, be good, and do good, and the courage to serve the people. Protect us as we stand against injustice and iniquity, and inspire our endeavors to find the right solutions to the problems that are affecting our fellow citizens. Grant that we may always work together with humility and respect for the greater happiness of all and the honor and glory of our country. Live from the UNC Battleground, this is the Virtual Report, streaming on all platforms.
Moving this people's revolution, my brothers and sisters. Let's all walk together as one. This revolution is about restoring our democracy. And this revolution is about stopping this creeping dictatorship. This is the people.
Good evening, brothers and sisters. Welcome to our UNC Virtual Platform. I am Brian Baig, and I am proud to be the legal officer of the United National Congress. This evening, I am here with my UNC sister, Marsha Walker, and together, we will be taking you through tonight's program. And we're going through quick and fast. Our first speaker is a new addition to the UNC family, and we welcome him with open arms. He's a business executive, entrepreneur, and economist from Diego Martin. He has recently acted as an opposition senator this week. He is here with us tonight on the UNC Virtual Platform to speak on the dire state of the economy under this wicked P&M regime. Please welcome to the UNC Platform, my brothers and sisters, Mr. Dominic Smith.
Tables are turning, your eyes are opening. Welcome to the revolution.
People crying out for justice. Some of them crying out for freedom.
Want freedom.
Everybody crying out for democracy. Now it's time to take a stand. Yeah.
Come on! Cause this is the revolution. People's revolution. This is the revolution. I wanna hear everybody sing. Everybody sing freedom. Man and woman sing freedom. Everybody sing freedom. Everybody sing. As we move in this people's revolution, my brothers and sisters, let's all walk together as one. This revolution is about restoring our democracy. And this revolution is about
from some of the greats that have gone on before. In particular, Helen Keller once said, and I quote, "Alone, we can do so little, but together we can do so much, and we will do much in this country, my friends." And so we are gathered here because we believe in these words, and these words transform our individual voices to a strong chorus, a chorus that says one vision, one mission, one voice. And so, brothers, comrades, we are in this fight together. And make no mistake, this is, my friends, a fight for Trinidad and Tobago. And we must approach this battle as warriors, but also as doves. Gentle as doves and wise as serpents. You see, comrades, we need to be vicious in our striking down of injustice that is plaguing our nation. But we need to be gentle with the people we are called to serve. This, my friends, is the difference between us and them, between a government for the people and a government against the people. And so, my friends, we must ready ourselves for the task ahead, to sharpen our battle tools, to defend our people from tyranny and the suffering that has become commonplace in our blessed land of Trinidad and Tobago. But with great responsibility, comrades, there's also great purpose. And with our numbers, we have strength to overcome any obstacle that they lay before us. We are not alone in this cause, and so it's with great pride that I stand before you today as a servant and a warrior for the United National Congress. You see, united friends, take pride in that. Look at the brother next to you, the sister to the right of you, and take pride in your fellow man and their commitment to our common cause. Because no amount of celebration held at a convention just over the weekend will stop our march for our people. And so today, friends, I want to chat a bit about a headline that graced in the newspapers on September 2022. And it said, Column's best year ever. Well, what a statement. I never knew the minister had a good year, but apparently he did. And so I quote from that article now. After 6 years, and listen to the propaganda that is spewed in our media. After 6 years of cutting and contriving, Finance Minister Colum Inbert can look back at 2022, a year that he did not have to worry about government overdrafts or whether the country's debt was getting out of hand. For the first year since he became Minister of Finance in September 2015, Inbert has more money than expected. The Russia and Ukraine war led to a soaring energy price, which gave him unbudgeted and unexpected $8 billion in revenue. So friends, you know what that means? Imagine it took a war between two sovereign states just so that our finance minister could have the best year ever. Can you imagine that? And you can boast, you can hear him boasting in the backdrop based on the pain and suffering of our fellow global citizens. And the article should in fact read, brothers, Colum's best year and Trinidad's worst year to date. Because when we peel the mango, and I use mango, of our current circumstance, friends, we are ripe for trouble. We're in big trouble, folks. But this is not surprising, comrades. As I observe the policies and practices of this government, I am mesmerized by the thought process of the administration in the management of the affairs of our beautiful Trinidad and Tobago. It is as though we're living in a political parody, a dystopian society, what I like to call a P&M Twilight Zone, a Bermuda Triangle of affairs as we navigate poorly the destiny of our sovereign state. We are heading into fiscal abyss, friends. And this is not any joke. And let us understand that our economic future cannot rely on the war between nations. But let us consider what the economists say about this so-called surplus. This surplus of $1 billion after apparently 14 good old years. In response, Mariano Brown in The Guardian said, while I think we should be glad that TNT has achieved a fiscal surplus, this is entirely fortuitous, even due to the high energy prices and absolutely, and I repeat, absolutely nothing to do with planning or management by the ministry. Dr. Marlene Arts was quoted as saying, it was a little strange. The country went suddenly from being in recovery from COVID-19 to a surplus. And the word she used was strange. I think it's important, she continues, for the ministry to also release the expenditure lines from the various ministries so that we have a clear sense of where this surplus is and the balanced budget is. Because clearly, the minister himself didn't even have a line of sight when he presented in the 2023 budget. And so, friends, it is a curious surplus indeed. And I would like to expand on what I mean by curious so that there's no misunderstanding. It is strange, friends. The surplus is bizarre. It is unusual. It is abnormal, friends. And so, from my logic, there can only be three reasons. One, two, three. Why our goodly Minister of Finance would try to elevate the numbers coming out of the Ministry of Finance. Well, one, and it doesn't give me pride to say this, none at all, he simply lacks the knowledge and the competence to be a Minister of Finance. And I say that with no joy, but it's an unfortunate truth. Two, he's aware of what he's doing and purposefully trying to misdirect the public for his own benefit. Three, clearly the minister is drinking from his own egotistical cup and has fallen into believing his own lies. And those are the three options before us, friends. Those are the three options before our great nation. So let's deal with the first issue. And in the Fundamentals of Wealth Gathering, there's a book called The Richest Man in Babylon by George S. Clason. And one of the fundamentals of building wealth in that book, it says, never send a bricklayer to buy jewels. You see, in the story, friends, the gentleman said, you know what, I'm going to send my friend, the bricklayer, to purchase jewels overseas. But the brickman only know how to build a house. So how can he go and express expertise to then buy fine jewelry? Well, the result was obvious. He came back with fake merchandise. And so the lesson here today, friends, is that when one simply lacks the competence to do a job, when you lack the competence to manage the affairs of a ministry, you simply are unable to deliver the results. And so never send a bricklayer to buy jewels, friends. And that is what we have been doing. You see, brothers and sisters, this speaks to specialization and expertise. The ability for persons to understand their area of expertise is crucial in managing the affairs of a country. And one must be vulnerable enough to say, hey, I don't have this particular skill, but I can rely on someone who does. But the PNM government, they don't like to ask for favors. They don't like to ask for help from anyone. And this is the arrogance that has gotten us into the position we are in. Friends, you see, we're not running a parlor. Now, I have no problem with parlor, because in parlor, you have basic economics in parlor running. But when you're running the finance of a country, your accounting must make sense. And so let's look a bit closer at our circumstance. We have an unemployment rate of 4.5%. We have a labor force participation rate of about 54.5%. We have a debt to GDP ratio of 71.8%. Friends, the average amount of debt to GDP in a normal state is around 40%. We are in the 70s, friends. And last year, we were in fact around the 80th percentile. That cannot be seen as a good thing, friends. According to the central bank, let's dig a bit deeper. Our gross public sector debt to GDP is 86.2%. And our net public sector debt to GDP is 79.5%. Friends, I ask you, where really is this surplus coming from? I want to ask the minister, what about the monies owed to contractors? Recently, in the news, again, Housing Development Corporation, the Minister of Housing said that the corporation had owed $1.3 billion to contractors. So I'm asking the minister, did you account for this in your grand surplus? The second question we need to ask is, what about VAT returns? Have you been paying the businesses their VAT returns? And the minister even said in an article, we have, and I quote, we have an inefficient VAT system. This is what our minister says. Imbud admitted The problem with the VAT system is compliance. We have heard all sorts of suggestions. Maybe we should have a sales tax. Mr. Tax himself, right? So, I want to ask the minister again, where is this mystery surplus coming from? I want to also ask him, in terms of the ministries and the allocations, how many ministries did not get the allocation that went back to the Ministry of Finance? These are questions we need to ask. I want to ask the minister again, how much money did the Ministry of Works not get so that work could have been done to relieve flooding? And these are issues that they are very much aware of. You see, this is not an empathetic government, because they know what they are doing. They know, and they think you're a fool. So let us shine light where they don't want us to shine light at all. Minister Faris Al-Walri said, and I quote, in Loop News on October 3rd, "We are very acutely aware of drainage and irrigation. We are acutely aware of cemeteries and cremation facilities, of markets and abattoirs, of local roads and bridges, and disaster preparedness." This is in October, friends. He also noted that there was an 82% increase in funding for drainage, and 192% increase in funding related to markets. And so I ask you good people, do we really have a surplus? You see, there's a quote that says, "A man's wealth is not in the coins of his purse. It is in his income." And friends, our income is troubling. And you see, this leads us to the second question. Is the minister aware of what he's doing and purposely trying to misdirect the public? And so let us consider that if this is the truth, my friends, gentlemen, this tells us that this is a very dangerous situation. It's dangerous to the integrity of our democracy and speaks to the vile attempt to trick and mislead the public. You see, friends, in an article in The Guardian, recently on November 24, 2022, 6,000 businesses face permanent closure. But we're speaking about a surplus? 6,000 businesses, people who are hardworking, on the breadline. Can you imagine the trickle-down economic impact on the basic earners of those businesses? We need governance with a heart, and that is what we are lacking in our current government. And so, friends, when we speak to the surplus, the minister was right about one thing. This is a surplus of lies. We have a surplus of deceit. We have a surplus of mismanagement in this country. We have a surplus of ineptitude. We have a surplus of arrogance. And we have a surplus of clearly delusion by this government. Well, I tell you today, friends, they want us to drink this concoction of lies. But at the next general election, we will give them the bitter taste of defeat. Friends, I want to say today that we want change. We want real change in this country. And the businesses in this country, the poor people in this country, Christmas is 2 weeks away. We have flood victims about 2 weeks ago that are still struggling. Where's the empathy of this government? Where is the caring nature of this government? And so I say today, friends, when you come to this stage and you come to speak to our people, remember, we will not be silenced. We will not be muffled in the mouths. We will use our voices. We will bring honesty and integrity back to this country under the leadership of the Honorable Kamala Prasad Bisesa. Remember, friends, alone we can do little, but together we can do so much. Thank you.
This is the revolution. I want to hear everybody sing. Everybody sing freedom. Man and woman sing freedom. Everybody sing freedom. Everybody sing. As we move in this people's revolution, my brothers and sisters, let's all walk together as one. This revolution is about restoring our democracy. And
thank you, Dominic. Damien, I see I have another St. Mary's fella to contest with. You and Anil in trouble. It's David and Dominic versus Damien and Anil now. Pressure in the Senate. Dominic, you are so right. This is a fight for our country. And permit me to thank our honorable political leader who has given her life to fighting for our country. This week and the week before, I know citizens have endured the heartbreak of listening to the Commission of Inquiry, the public hearings. But if it was not for Kamla Persad-Bissessar and her commitment to fight, I don't think the country remembers that we would not have had a Commission of Inquiry. God help us if they were to try to figure this out privately behind closed doors. If nothing else, thank you to our honorable opposition leader for fighting so that we could now hear the public hearings. We could sit for ourselves and listen to the evil that is PNM. So I thank the honorable political leader for that continued fight. Up next, we have a veteran UNC soldier. He's previously served as the chairman of NP during the Kamla Persad-Bissessar administration and is the Northeast coordinator of the UNC National Executive. Please put your hands together for Mr. Neil Gosain.
This revolution is about stopping this creeping dictatorship. This is the people's revolution. Peoples are turning, your eyes are opening. Welcome to the revolution.
People crying out for justice. Some of them crying out for freedom.
Want freedom.
Everybody crying out for democracy.
All our viewers.
Now it's time to take a stand. Yeah.
Come on! Cause this is the revolution. The people's revolution.
Rumors of another
This is the
shuffle
revolution.
was spreading
I wanna hear everybody say. Everybody.
Wildfire across the country. I thought that the rumor was real. I really wanted it to be real. Especially at a time when the country is facing enormous challenges and flooding in many areas. The rivers in Caroni, Degomating, Maraval, and St. Joseph have breached their banks and caused major destruction and despair in its path. Several communities were affected as homes and vehicles were flooded across the country. Many areas such as the Bamboo, El Socorro, and many other areas are still inaccessible. Flooding along the Caroni area also caused the submersion of a major part of the Uriah Butler Highway. One might speculate that it's an attempt to change the narrative from the many issues facing this PNM administration, from the death of the divers and the most incompetent handling of the rescue plan this country has ever seen by a state-owned company, to the murders that we have seen, the most murders we have seen ever in our history. The gross negligence is mind-boggling, brothers and sisters, not to mention the state of our roads and drainage system across the country. It really seems to be one thing after the next with this Dr. Rowley-led government. So many issues of late, we can't even count them. It does appear, however, that the latest rumor mongering of the reshuffling was just another smokescreen to placate the dissatisfaction voiced by many of the citizens in the flood-stricken areas. It really seems to me many issues surrounding this government, they are so insurmountable. There are so many examples of incompetence and ineptitude, such as the fiasco of the merit list and the ongoing saga involving the Police Service Commission, and yet another postponement of the appointment of the Commissioner of Police, and many other issues like the rising crime rate, the rising murder rate, decrease in the fuel subsidies, the dilapidated roads, increased price of goods and services, and the massive inflation. Brothers and sisters, that is a major issue. We have inflation, and we heard Dominic speak about the state of the economy under the Minister of Finance. 90% of our citizens get the feeling that their major concerns are not addressed at all, and the government is only pretending to work. Don't you get that feeling, brothers and sisters, that the government only pretending to work, only pretending to work? One of our major concerns is our safety and the security. Yet, Minister Hines still holds his position despite the many national issues within his ministry. The influx of guns on the streets, kidnapping, and again, the most murders we have ever seen in our history. The list is endless. The Prime Minister proclaimed that I'm not firing Hines, addressing the 50th convention of the People's National Movement at Queen's Park, Savannah yesterday. He categorically rejects calls for him to remove his national security minister as a means of addressing the continuing spiral of murders and crime and violence. That is why we have 560 murders so far. And that is why we should bold that figure to our Prime Minister's chest, because everyone knows you and your team are incompetent. 50 years and you want to celebrate while people drowning in the floods. In the corporate or business world, you, Mr. Prime Minister, are like an executive CEO, and one of your managers are not performing and underperforming, and his inability to do his job is actually causing lives to be lost. You say you are not firing him, then you are costing the country and our citizens actual lives, and therefore you yourself must go if you refuse to act. Prime Minister, you are failing us every day. In fact, you really need to do something. Please let Hines be the first to be moved and put somewhere where we can't see him sleeping on the job anymore, or doing a jig in a party and waving his locks from side to side. His inability to make citizens feel safe is beyond his capabilities, and everyone knows it. Then there's our dwindling energy sector, unable to generate energy revenue from our state-owned energy enterprises. And the failure of the energy sector is looming over our heads, brothers and sisters. And yet, the Minister Stuart Young holds his position nonetheless. The whole reshuffle rumor looks like it was just meant to distract and make the population feel that the Dr. Rowley's government is too dissatisfied with the performance of his ministers. Yet we haven't seen him in the public or on the ground during this disastrous floods. It is another puppy show to hoodwink the population and to show the population that they too are concerned for our well-being. Everywhere we see UNC councillors, we see a sea of yellow, UNC MPs, Kamala Prasad-Bisasa herself on the ground helping distributing drinking water, food hampers, and actually helping with the cleanup of affected citizens. Billions and billions have been spent on national security in this country to date, and the Rowley-led PNM government has nothing to show for it. Only a blood-stained record, over 560 murders for the year already. For God's sake, we can't even patch a pothole. They can't give us water. They can't give us electricity, far less national security. It is really time for the PNM to go now. As we all know, all of Dr. Keith Rowley's ministers are underperforming. Not one is making a difference in the population's lives. They all seem unfit for their portfolios, brothers and sisters. It's like shuffling a pack of cards composed of only jokers, where we only draw bad cards. I thank you.
Man and woman sing freedom. Everybody sing freedom. Everybody sing. As we move in this people's.
Thank you, Neil. You gave us a plethora of a lot of problems affecting this country. And I mean from flooding to bad governance. I thought Christmas came early with the firing of Hines, but I forgot we have a Prime Minister who is the Grinch, who is take away happiness from everyone. Our next speaker is a fearless champion of the people. He's well known as a businessman, a long-time UNC warrior. He is in the Senate, a powerful advocate for our citizens, and he continues to be fearless and stand up for your rights. Please welcome to the virtual platform, Senator Damian Lyda.
Let's all walk together as one. This revolution is about restoring our democracy. And this revolution is about stopping this creeping dictatorship. This is the people's revolution.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And firstly, let me start off by saying to my sister, Marsha Walker, myself and Anna Roberts are not worried about Mr. David and Mr. Dominic from St. Mary's in the Senate, especially when Fatima College is now in the finals in the intercall against St. Benedict's. We'll soon be champions again. So I'm not concerned about that. But I do say good evening to my political leader, Mrs. Kamala Prasad Bisesa. I say good evening to all of those who are here with us on the virtual, online, listening on Facebook, on YouTube, and those who have joined us in person here this evening. I'd like to also congratulate the speakers before me, and of course our very new speaker, Dominic, for the first time on a platform. Let's congratulate him for an excellent delivery on his first occasion. But though that may be good news about Fatima and Dominic, again, yet again, we see another day of gruesome murders in this country. Today, the murder toll has now exceeded some 566 and climbing. Again, we see brutal murders caused at the hands of criminals with high-powered rifles, high-powered guns that continue to come through our official ports and our porous borders. It was today, on this very day, with these murders going out of control, that we also wake up to a Newsday article that says the port fixed container scanners fully operational. You hearing that? This is from the authorities of the Port of Port of Spain. This was following an article or an advertisement put out on Sunday by the same port authorities indicating that this was the only port in Trinidad and Tobago with an operational scanner. Yet we hear that the scanners are working. The Port of Port of Spain also indicated in that article that they were not responsible for inspecting containers or cargo coming in, but it was the responsibility of Customs and Excise. That falls under Minister Imbert, by the way. Whilst last week, the issue of non-functioning scanners was discussed in a Parliament Joint Select Committee on National Security, while guns continue to flow into this country through our official ports of entry, we have a port authority that is categorically telling the nation and advertising that scanners are indeed working. How are the guns getting through? They are distancing themselves from the use of the scanners, throwing the responsibility of that under the Customs and Excise, which falls under the Ministry of Finance. And you have a Minister of National Security who's none the wiser. Asleep at the wheel, in some narcoleptic sativa dream, falling asleep on himself everywhere. This is the kind of chaos that is happening within your government. One hand don't know what the next one doing, and people dying in the streets. This is your official ports, you know, brothers and sisters. But brothers and sisters, what about the porous borders? I have been speaking at length about the porous borders since the pandemic. During the COVID pandemic, I had exposed this government's failure to secure our borders through land, air, and sea, which we see thousands of illegal immigrants flowing into our country, drugs littering the streets of our nations, and guns and drugs coming in freely into the hands of criminals who now have this murder rate at record highs. First time in the history of Trinidad and Tobago, we have gotten this high under this PNM administration. I warned you about this. And lo and behold, brothers and sisters, yesterday, Sunday, 7 a.m. in the morning, while the waters of the coast, northwest coast of Trinidad were calm, while the mountains of Venezuela were clear in the distance, and where we could see how close Venezuela is to our land. You see, as we come close to Stobles Bay, take a look at what we saw at Stobles Bay at the Coast Guard base. Play it for me.
The borders and at the legal, legitimate ports, guns coming in, and all Coast Guard vessels, 14 of them park up, doing nothing. Senator Lyda, come in.
Here we are at 7:30 in the morning, when guns are coming in our borders, when illegal immigrants are flowing through willy-nilly in this country, when drugs are soiling the streets of our country. We see all of our Coast Guard vessels sitting down here right now. The United National Congress purchased 6 diamond vessels, which should have been patrolling our shores today and protecting our shores. But what do we see? No fuel for the vessels, so they can't patrol. We see no maintenance on those vessels. We see no crew for those vessels. And millions of dollars that the United National Congress spent in 6 diamond vessels sit here, and then the PNM comes to you and convinces you through the Prime Minister and then National Security Minister Stuart Young that they must go and spend $600 million on 2 hostile vessels. And that is 2 hostile vessels, while 6 hostile vessels sit in a graveyard in Karanaj today, in Chagaramas today. Hostile. Brothers and sisters, and you wonder why during the pandemic, and now we see the amount of drugs, guns, and illegal immigrants coming into this country. Is this why we are in the state we are in today? All vessels parked up, as we saw in that video. When you look at that video, you see all the ships on it with the flags of Independence Day, that they were decorated on Independence Day, and which they haven't even taken down as yet. So those vessels have been sitting down there as a decoration. They're not going anywhere. And here we see 7 years later, the same problems with our porous borders. And we ask ourselves the question, why? Let me remind this country here today that it was Kamala Prasad Bissessar and the United National Congress-led government that purchased 7 diamond vessels and 1 Chinese vessel to secure our borders. All of which were parked up in that video. The PNM benefited from the delivery of these vessels in 2016 after Kamala Prasad Bissessar secured them, purchased them, and then demitted office. And the country made that mistake to make her demit office. These 6 vessels and 1 Chinese vessels have been sitting in Stobles Bay, barely being used. Hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayers' money was spent on those diamond vessels with the capability of securing our borders to stop this problem we are having today, this crime problem. And then after Kamala Prasad Bissessar demitted office, leaving TNT, the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard, with the best fleet of vessels in the English-speaking Caribbean. You hearing that? It is Kamala Prasad Bissessar that left them with those resources. And then having these boats parked up and used for only reactionary purposes, the government comes to you to convince you, the taxpayers of this country, to spend $600 million on 2 hostile vessels, which are now parked up right next to them 6 diamond vessels. $600 million of your taxpayers' dollars spent without the oversight of the public procurement regulator. We warned you, whilst the Prime Minister and Stuart Smallpin Young drinking scotch and eating shrimps. That is what Anil said. That's what's going on down in Australia. We also understand that the government overpaid for those vessels, but when we get into office, we will investigate that deal. We will investigate that deal. Brothers and sisters, let me remind you that that it was a previous PNM government under Patrick Manning that purchased 6 hostile vessels that after some 6 months, because they were not fit for purpose in our waters, were all damaged and then placed in a graveyard, a ship graveyard in Chagaramas to sit and collect barnacles. Maybe they should put some flags on that too to decorate them. These same 6 hostile vessels, so we wonder what will happen with these next 2. Now the PNM comes to purchase 2 more with hundreds of millions of dollars and parks them up. The government spends hundreds of millions in equipment but doesn't give them resources to operate. But the Prime Minister says he could sleep good at night. You see, the Prime Minister could sleep good at night because he have a special branch protecting him. A very special branch protecting him. But they're parked up and we ask ourselves the question, why? And I told you why back in the pandemic. I told you that the government failed to provide the resources for the Coast Guard to make them operational. I told you in the pandemic that they failed to provide diesel to run these vessels. I told you that the government failed to maintain a service level agreement. Back then, we asked if they've gone into one now, because we heard some of those vessels, those same hostile vessels, had some damage. And we told you that the government did not provide the resources to the Coast Guard for them to ensure that they had sufficient person trained to run all of those vessels. We told you that. But let me say this to you, because I spoke to a Coast Guard officer, and he informed us that the situation is the same. They still do not have the resources. And they indicated that should they have the resources, they will be in a better position to secure our borders. So we cannot blame the Coast Guard. We must blame Hines. We must blame the PM, and we must blame this government for their failure and their neglect to support the Coast Guard. But then Minister Hines comes and is quoted on the Express on February the 8th, 2022, in an article reported on TV6 Morning Edition interview hosted by Fazil Mohammed. And he says here, and brothers and sisters, it is very painful to listen to anything that Fitzgerald et Albert Hines tells us. But I will go through the labor of quoting him today. So please, I ask you to forgive me for doing this. But I will do it. He says, and I quote, "No," the famous words, you'll remember this. "My duty is not to ensure that people feel safe and secure." You'll remember that? Yes. But he goes on. "My duty is to ensure that those organizations and agencies that are responsible for public safety, border security, that they are clear about what the people through the government policy is, that they are provided with the resources that they need, and that they are provided with the resources they need, and that I lend encouragement and general support to them. That is my duty." So Fitzgerald Hines, you are not giving the Coast Guard the resources that they need. So even if this warped standard of performance is in your brain about what good performance is, then you have failed, Fitzgerald Hines. You have failed, sir. You are already a failure in the eyes of citizens in this country. This much was on display when a whole nation collectively rejoiced at the rumor of you being reshuffled and terminated, sir. And then, oh, what an anticlimax. We went from joy to sorrow. And that was confirmed when your Prime Minister came out and confirmed to the nation. What did he say? "I am not firing Hines." So brothers and sisters, you are stuck with this incompetence. You are stuck with crime. You are stuck with murders. And the only way to change this is to put back the United National Congress led by Kamala Persad-Bissessar. So I say, Hines must go. The PNM must go. And Keith Rowley must go. Brothers and sisters, your government doesn't care about the porous borders. They don't care about the fact that we have a runaway crime problem in this country. They don't care about the guns flowing into this country. They simply don't care about you. But let me tell you what they care about. Let me tell you what they care about. They care about the assets of CLICO. They care about the assets of the CL Financial Group. That's what they care about. This government is a greedy government. Their eyes, their long eyes on all them assets. The government is talking about giving back Clico. And we're going to hear something tomorrow, we're waiting to hear about it. I hope they're coming to talk about giving it back to the shareholders. But you are putting this company in the hands of liquidators. I say to you, give Clico back to the rightful owners. What the government is trying to do is to liquidate this company. So we want to know who you're going to sell the assets to. And at what peppercorn price you're going to sell it at. I see Mr. Alvin Hilaire has done the right thing and followed Section 44D of the Central Bank Act, as he's done so. And in this case, though it has been years later, though he said several years ago he was giving it back, he is now following the law. He's following the law and relinquishing control over the Clico, because we know that Clico is now not in danger of flouting Section 44D of the Central Bank Act. Therefore, they have now acted in accordance to the law. Because let me tell you something, what does happen to people who just break the law? You just end up in handcuffs, I'm just telling you. And as Senator Roberts will say, it have a bucket for some people who break in the law inside a Golden Grove. But before you get to that bucket, you have to put on handcuffs, So I see that the central bank governor is following the law. So he doesn't have to worry about handcuffs, right? But the question is now that the law now falls, in keeping with the law, falls on this government-appointed liquidator. So if the central bank could have deemed it fit to hand back Clico to its shareholders, why then is the government still involved to CL Financial through their liquidators? You must account to the people, because we understand it is Grant Thornton who is the liquidators, the government-appointed liquidators. Now we know they are a reputable international liquidation firm. We know that. And what the liquidator should be doing today, with Clico under their control, is that the liquidators should be coming to us to tell us that they are prepared to sit down with the shareholders of Clico and the government to see how to exit. The government should be sitting with these liquidators and shareholders to settle the question of the fate of Clico and the CL Financial Group. So we are asking the question here today. Why is the government not sitting with the rightful shareholders of this company in a transparent manner to come to agreement on how the assets will be liquidated, if it is to be liquidated? Otherwise, brothers and sisters, valuable assets of the CL Financial Group could end up in the hands of who? The friends, family, and financiers of this government. Is that what they want? We see, and we have heard that the liquidators inside of True Value right now. And we understand that there's a particular friend of the leadership of the PNM interested in buying True Value. And we heard there's somebody else earmarked for Trincity Mall, and we saw advertising in the papers for sale. And we know about the prime real estate. Brothers and sisters, we remember the bacchanal of no man's land in Tobago, where the government wanted to purchase this land for some $10 a square foot. And then to add to that, to put billions of dollars to build a hotel to hand over to Sandals, so that they could walk inside without putting a dollar infrastructure. But it is your United National Congress that stood up and exposed that. And it is UNC and the people of Tobago that rejected that deal, which was a poor deal. Brothers and sisters, as I come to a close, I'm running out of time. The government and the liquidators, Grant Thornton, must cease and desist from any further liquidation of any assets of CL Financial and Clico before this open and transparent record is taken of the assets. And I repeat, a consolidated financial statement must be produced for the CL Financial Group, reunited with Clico, to determine if it is its settled financial position, and it must be done by a reputable accounting firm. Let me remind you of some of the lucrative assets that the PNM financiers have been greedy to get their hands on. Assets like Call Fire, True Value Supermarket, Long Circular Mall, HCL that owns thousands of acres of land, Methanol Holdings Limited, we saw it in the papers just yesterday. And of course, they have been trying their worst to sell Clico, but that matters before the court. What is also required at this stage is for the liquidator to provide a report to see if CLICO, after you reunited with the CL Financial Group, is now in a consolidated position to repay all the debts, then be returned to the shareholders. So instead, what do we see? A fire sale of assets. For example, when we saw the sale of the CL Marine to the government for peppercorn, what was the value of CL Marine when the government acquired it to pay down the debt? Who was the valuator? And what was the true value? This was another asset that passed in the rush, another CL Financial fire sale. We the people want to know, you know, because that's the same CL Marine that this government, after 2 years later, after taking control, due to what we understand was a lack of maintenance on this, has now caused the entire dry dock down in Chagaramas to collapse into the seabed. So, brothers and sisters, I now close. Why is the government's manhandling of CLICO important to you, the people of Trinidad and Tobago? CLICO is an indigenous company built by citizens, sons and daughters of the soil over 8 decades and counting. The birth and success of the CL Financial was that the average Trinbagonian could get access to financing at a time when many were excluded. Now this PNM government appears determined to collapse what has been once our greatest success story in the business landscape of our nation. You have to ask yourself the question, if they can do this ruthless act to such a large conglomerate, imagine how easily they can destroy your small business for your family. Imagine how they could destroy your personal investments in this country. So therefore, an attack of CLICO in this context is an attack on all of us. And we put the government on notice. After tomorrow, when we hear what they have to announce on CLICO, the United National Congress will be keeping their eyes on every single asset of the CL Financial Group. We will be looking at every single fire sale, and we will expose you if you try to do something illegal. I thank you.
We're crying out for justice.
Some of them crying out for freedom.
Want freedom. Everybody crying out for democracy.
Now it's time to take a stand. Yeah.
Come on!
Thank you, Senator Leiter. Of course, in true UNC fashion, he and Anil gone way above the call of duty, jump on a boat to go and spy on the Coast Guard on a Sunday. That is the fight that is only UNC. Our next speaker has held technical and leadership positions in over 10 organizations, including an economist, a lecturer in economics, and head of operations of a financial institution. He is the holder of a BSc in economics and an MBA in finance. Please welcome former UNC Senator, Mr. Tahaka Obika.
Everybody sing freedom. Man and woman sing freedom. Everybody sing freedom. Everybody sing. As we move in this people's revolution, my brothers and...
Good evening, UNC family. Good evening. Lovely. A pleasant good evening to Honorable Political Leader Mrs. Kamala Persad-Bissessar, the next Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Now I see that the PNM had an internal election, and I want to say that that has to be in the era of one member, one vote, because that started around the time when Kamala Persad-Bissessar led the UNC. The one member, one vote in political parties in Trinidad and Tobago. All right? I stand to be corrected. My father is a historian, I'm the economist. But in the era of the one member, one vote in national political parties in Trinidad and Tobago, Keith Rowley has gotten what has to be the lowest votes for political leadership in an internal election in a national party. Less than 9,000 votes. I think I got more votes than that as the Tobago representative in the internal elections in the UNC. So it means that that is really a vote of no confidence by the members of the PNM, the financial members of the PNM. The card-carrying members of the PNM have no confidence in their own political leader, the sitting Prime Minister, Keith Rowley.
take that in your pipe and smoke it. Now, I want to address some issues here. We have the Minister of Trade and Industry. 2 weeks ago, attending the TTMA's President's dinner, stating that the Trinidad and Tobago economy has turned a pivotal corner, and citing that the manufacturing sector is part of that, and praising her government. But it seems that this Minister of Trade and Industry did not consult, because I worked at the Ministry of Trade and Industry over a decade ago. And it seems that this Minister of Trade and Industry did not consult with her own economists at the Ministry of Trade and Industry. Because if the Minister of Trade and Industry would have consulted with her own economists at the Ministry of Trade and Industry, she would not have embarrassed herself by making that statement. Because since this PNM government came into office, manufacturing sector contribution declined from $31.5 billion in 2015 under the leadership of Kamla Prasad-Bisesa. And every year successively it declined. It was on a downward trend, down to 30.6, down to 13 in successive years, 29.4 and 29.3 billion. A decline of $5.2 billion over 6 years. Now, by any calculation, and this is simple maths, if you drop from 31.5 to 26.3, that is a big drop. $5.2 billion decline, and continuing to decline. So I'm not sure which corner she's talking about, or if she's confusing that with a roundabout. You know, spinning top in mud. Another, I want to congratulate my brother for joining the panel and as a fellow social scientist, contributing on the points on Coleman Burt's pronouncement of the $1 billion. But it comes as no surprise that the PNM is claiming to have a surplus. It comes as no surprise. Because when you cut back on spending to the extent where you unlawfully withhold funds due to manufacturers as VAT refunds, they are breaking the law, unlawfully holding people's money. It's not their money, people's money, and then coming to say, well, we save. Yes, save. You're holding what does not belong to you. Now, it's like if this VAT refunds thing is like if you're building your house, you hire a builder, you tell him go buy bag one, sing, buy some material, $10,000 for the material, you have the quotation in hand. He gone, he spent $5,000, trust the rest, take all the material, finish your roof, tell your boy I save $5,000 and he gone. 2 weeks later, bag one, sing, send police and knock on your door to collect back the $5,000. That is not your money. That belongs to them. The billions of dollars that this government has not paid the businesses, the manufacturers, the companies involved in international trade where, in fact, they are due VAT refunds, is not the government's money. It belongs to the businesses. Give it to them. So bad was it that the day after Coleman Burt presented the budget and spoke about, at that time, $9 billion extra. Now he's saying it's $10 billion extra. $9 billion extra. You had a businessman after whom our #1 business school is named after, Arthur Lockjack, complaining in open forum that in his group of companies alone, they are owed tens of millions of dollars, this one group. So, which surplus they talking about? You're owing people money. You can't owe people money and claim surplus. You can't owe people money and go and fet with the money. You can't owe people money and disregard their concerns and then claim that you make a profit. It is not yours to play with. You understand? You ain't paying VAT. You have to pay it back. You have to pay it back. And then I want to call on the Minister of Trade and Industry. Since we have a dishonest Minister of Finance who does not seem to want to answer the question whenever it is posed as to how much VAT refunds remains outstanding, I want to put it to the Minister of Trade and Industry. Since the Minister of Finance can't find the decency to own up to what is the balance due to businesses, Minister of Trade, disclose to the population what is the sum of VAT refunds owed to the businesses. And then we will start to talk about surplus. Now, but if the same Minister of Trade and Industry couldn't find the economists in our own ministry to let us know that the manufacturing sector declined by $5.2 billion in the 6 years, because we don't have 2022 figures, I'm not sure I could get the Minister of Trade and Industry to respond to that. But hopefully the questions will be put to her and she'll be able to answer them. Now, another issue that we have to raise is with respect to the fuel subsidy. Very important issue. Now, a very important issue that you have to look at is crude oil prices. The Prime Minister closed the budget debate in October. I think it was October the 5th this year. October the 4th. And the Prime Minister outdoored a sliding scale to calculate the price of crude oil for the months of this fiscal year, given the fluctuating price of oil and the government's intention, it's the P&M government's intention, to keep the subsidy at $1 billion per barrel, $1 billion overall for the year. This price increase has been in effect the very day Coleman Board read the budget, 26 September. So we have had October, November gone. Did anyone hear the Prime Minister coming to the Parliament or to the media to disclose what was the average price of crude oil experienced by the government for the past month? I didn't hear it. And of course, we can't depend on what we see online, because of blessed memory, Franklin Kahn would always tell you that only the government could tell you what is the true price and volume earned for oil. So we have to get it from the horse's mouth, as we say. The government must tell us what was the average price they earned for crude oil for the past month. Now, if in fact the price was less than $87.50 a barrel, the government has questions to answer. Because from Hansard of October the 4th, 2022, Keith Rowley, pages 214 to 216, for those of you who want to do your own research, he stated, and I quote, "Every month the government will post at the fuel use place a price based on the average price of oil during that month. So at the end of the month, the government will look at to see what was the average price of fuel during the month, and we will post that for the month ahead, and then we will do the same thing, average price, when the month ahead comes, end of the month, we will look at the average price." Has the government done that? At $87.50, premium will be $7.75, which is what you're paying now, super $6.97, diesel $4.41. If the price was $85 a barrel, premium will drop to $6.92. Has the price dropped? Super to $6.66, diesel will stay at $4.41. If it drops to $80, $6.28 for super, for premium, $6.05 for super. If it drops to $75, $5.68 for premium, $5.43 for super. So the government has not come to the population, and I put it to the media, whenever the Prime Minister resurfaces and gives an appointment with the media for an interview, please ask him, what was the average price for the past month? Go back to the Hansard of October the 4th, pages 214 to 216, and look at that same sliding scale that he gave, and see if, in fact, the price that we are paying at the pump is one that where we, the citizens, are in fact overpaying, and where the government is, as we say in Trinidad and Tobago, digging out the eye. Now, there's much to talk about in this country regarding the economy. And as an economist, I hope you all could bear with me for about 3 minutes while I go through one more very important economic point. And that has to do with the CAF loans, the Andina Development Bank. This is a bank set up in Caracas, and it's a development bank. It's an alternative to the Inter-American Development Bank. We in the Caribbean and Trinidad and Tobago have always been advocating for having our own sources of funding as South-South players in development. So we see no issue with the Andina Development Bank, mind you. We also support the Caribbean Development Bank. These are indigenous banks, banks that support South-South integration, and it's very important for our perspective on development. Not that we have anything against the IDB, all right? So the problem is that this government has increased its public debt to over 88%, according to the Minister of Finance. And from the CAF Bank alone, recently, we saw where they borrowed 1.1 billion TT dollars, 160 million US. This means that when you look at the external borrowing of the country, is US 4.77 billion. If 1/5 of that is due to the CAF Andina Development Bank, it raises a question in terms of sovereign credit risk. With this high concentration of debt in one international multilateral financial institution, it raises the question, well, are we comfortable with that? Because we know about food security in our country. We know about energy security, being able to feed ourselves, being able to power our industry with lights. But financial security is as equally important to our economic development and security by the ability to finance ourselves and make decisions at the national level without being impacted by or played by the hands of a few persons who are in control of banks that lend us money. A simple example, when we borrowed money from the IMF, everyone up and down the Caribbean were of the view that they were pulling the strings and forcing governments to privatize where they didn't want to and so on. So, whilst we cast no aspersions on the Andina Development Bank, we are saying the government has a duty to disclose to the parliament, to the population, what is the extent to our indebtedness to this bank, and of course, ensure that our financial security, our economic security, is intact. So I want to close on the role of the government. Now, the role of the government is to diversify the economy. But this economy has declined. Full employment, we lost 100,000 plus jobs. Price stability, just look at the price of food in the supermarkets. I don't have to tell you about that. Protecting the vulnerable. Of course, while they fed people flood. And of course, reducing income inequality. Now, so to answer these questions, the young students in 2015 and 2020 asked the government, Mr. Politician, what is the time? And they gave them cuts to gate. No access to education. The single mothers, the mothers in poverty, even though they are part of a family structure, asked about help for the babies for milk. They said, Mr. Politician, what is the time? This government cut the milk grant. They cut the food grant. They cut access to social assistance. And then when the workers in Petrotrin asked, Mr. Politician, what is the time? This government bust their throat, send all of them home. And of course, now we're hearing that Keith Rowley got the least votes of any political leader in an internal election in Trinidad and Tobago. So now, when next any citizen asks, Mr. Politician, what is the time? You have to tell them it's time for an election to get rid of the Keith Rowley PNM and vote Kamla Prasad Bisesa for good governance in Trinidad and Tobago. I thank you.
Everybody crying out for democracy. Now it's time to take a stand, yeah.
Come on! Cause this is the revolution, the people's revolution. This is the revolution. I wanna hear.
Yeah, man. Thank you very much, Tahaka. What is the time? What is the time? The time is to call elections now. With that, our next speaker is a UNC powerhouse. He's a fearless and outspoken gentleman. He has a bachelor's degree in government with a minor degree in international relations, a diploma in law, and a postgraduate diploma in communications. Please welcome to the UNC Virtual Platform, the man known as the Peppermouth MP, the Member of Parliament of Princestown, Mr. Barry Padarat.
Everybody sing freedom, man and woman sing freedom. Everybody sing freedom, everybody sing. As we move in this people's revolution, my brothers and sisters, let's all walk.
Political leader of the United National Congress,
and the best Prime Minister Trinidad and Tobago has ever had, the Honorable Kamla Prasad Bisesa, colleagues from both the upper and lower houses of Parliament. This evening I see so many of our brothers and sisters from the local government fraternity, Trinidad and Tobago citizens all. In my political career, it is very rare that I ever quote those in public life that aptly and appropriately describes others. But on this occasion, there are no truer words that have been spoken describing Keith Christopher Rowley. I ask you to play the video.
That this Prime Minister is a lazy son of a bitch, and that he depends on all those incompetent ministers to do biddings all over the place.
Is one Ansel Roger, aptly describing that lazy son of a bitch who has been missing while Trinidad and Tobago is sunk in the floodwaters and people are devastated in this country. That lazy son of a bitch. If ever we had faith in anything Ansel Roger had to say to this country, it was that very statement. Brothers and sisters, when you want to see contempt, you want to see hate, you want to see malice, look at that son of a bitch, Keith Christopher Rowley. He who sees people as politically expendable because they do not support his views and they do not support his party. That lazy son of a bitch for 5 days could not be found in Trinidad and Tobago. But on Saturday morning, he could have found himself where? On the golf course on the Shagaramas Development Authority. If you do not believe me, for 5 days the Prime Minister didn't make one Facebook post. On Saturday morning, proud in his golf shorts and his golf cap, he is down in the CDA. That is Prime Minister Keith Christopher Rowley. Brothers and sisters, our deputy political leader, Jillian John, always tells us elections have consequences. Tonight I say you get the government that you deserve. When people choose race over progress, when people choose hate over advancement, and when people in this country choose malice over betterment. I read an article today coming out of the People's National Movement convention yesterday. The Prime Minister said that every Monday the UNC hold these Monday night forums and they speak obscenities and vulgarity from their platform. Now this is from a sick, psychotic man who visualizes Kamla Prasad Bisesa in a night in a hotel room coming to tell you that we speak obscenities and vulgarity on the Monday night platform. This is a sick, psychotic mind who Trinidad and Tobago voted into office, yet speaks about what? Cat and dog and geometry. Today, the horse has bolted from the stable, and the very man you have put in power in 2015, you have lived to regret it today in 2022. Today, we are paying the political price for that. Your children are paying the political price for that. Brothers and sisters, when I listened to a bit of the convention yesterday, every speaker from Marvin Gonsalves to Stuart Young to the Prime Minister themselves, he was at pains to convince the population that what? People were not suffering. The Prime Minister listed pensions, social development grants, public assistance as things that they were doing as though these things were new. As far back as Dr. Eric Williams' days, to Robinson, to Pandey, to Patrick Manning, to Kamla Prasad-Bissessa, this country has had old age pension. This country has had public assistance. Rowley has done nothing new to alleviate the trouble and the pain that the average man, woman, and child is facing in this country. So do not come with your bullshit and your hogwash to tell Trinbagonians that you are doing something for them. And it is about time in this country that we call a spade, and we are not afraid to call them out for what and who they are. I saw no editorials. I saw no newspaper report when Keith Rowley stood on a platform and called a former prime minister what she was saying geometry. And therefore tonight, we will have no compulsions for calling that hypocrite that is Keith Christopher Rowley out for who and what he is, because people in this country are dying and they are suffering every single day because of the policy of his government. Brothers and sisters, the UNC, we don't have to go and tell people that they are suffering outside there. They feel it. Our brother this evening, Dominic Smith, Neil Gosine, you heard from Senator Leiter about this $1 billion surplus that they're boasting about. And we ask ourselves, are you feeling it when you go to the supermarket? Are you feeling it in your pockets? Are you feeling it in your homes? So therefore, we in the UNC don't have to tell people that. People are feeling it themselves. But one thing we are sure, they cannot feel that $1 billion surplus. Yesterday in the Trinidad Express, Martin Daly wrote, and the headline was, "Do they hear themselves?" And it is as though they live in an alternative reality where, as Damien told you, guzzling whiskey and eating shrimps has clouded their brain and rational thinking, because people on the outside there do not enjoy the quality of life that Shamfa, who spends $59,000 on a Rome bill, enjoys. Now when a minister of government can tell you, don't eat macaroni pie, don't go to the movies 2-3 times for the week, they do not face the reality of not knowing where the next meal is coming from. But you, your children, and the people outside there, that is the reality that confronts you every single day of your life in this godforsaken country. One of the other things coming out of the convention yesterday, the Prime Minister announced under the public utilities system that the government will sign a loan with the IDB for $82 million. Now, we have been speaking to you about what has been happening with WASA and TNTech, and I want to deal with WASA first and foremost. And we have seen what has happened in the floods over the past week. And many of our UNC brothers and sisters, I see Councillor Raquel Ghani is here from the El Socorro area. We have Sister Khadija Amin in St. Augustine. Our brother Saddam Hussein, who was supposed to be on tonight's platform. Saddam is now sick, having spent 7 days in flood waters bringing relief to his constituents. Today I see in Mayaro, Pinal, Debe, Faizabad, they're begging WASA for water to do what? To clean up after the floods. Yesterday, Prime Minister announced that they will sign an $82 million US loan with the IDB with respect to WASA and this entire revamping of WASA. I want to share with you, brothers and sisters, some figures this evening from the Ministry of Works and Transport. And I'll come back to that point that I raised with you with respect to WASA. You see, even when they have money in their hands to spend, to make your life easier in the area of works and transport and public utilities because they do not have the institutional knowledge, the political will, and the competence, most importantly. Then nothing gets done. In the parliament on Friday, we had a matter of the adjournment. And when MP Saddam Hussein stood up and he told us under the Drainage and Irrigation Division of the Ministry of Works and Transport, in the financial year 2022-2023, that $31 million was allocated, but only $5 million was spent. When he told us that major river clearing program, these are line items in the budget in the black and white. When they allocated $12 million in their hands, money in their hands under the area of major river clearing program. $12 million, you know how much they spent? $1.5 million in a financial year. No wonder. In one day, the Caroni River burst its banks. In one day, Kapara and Tapara was flooded out like never before. Under the Infrastructure Rehabilitation and Flood Mitigation Program in last financial year, out of $4 million, again, cash in hand, this is money in their hands to spend to alleviate for Infrastructure Rehabilitation and Flood Mitigation Program. $4 million, you know how much they spent? $800,000. This is in the black and white. Under the area program of upgrades to fix existing drainage pumps and gate inventory, $15 million budgeted, they spent $3 million. Constituencies like St. Joseph, like San Juan Barataria, like Faizabad, like Siparia, I saw a political leader leading from the front, putting on her Wellington boots yesterday and bringing relief to her constituents. This last line item I spoke about, the program of upgrade to fix existing drainage pumps and gate inventory. It affects constituencies like Urupuch West, Siparia, Sawa Barataria, where they utilize these floodgates to protect them from the rising waters. And man, $15 million was allocated for that. And you do not have the political will or competence to deliver goods and services to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And then you go outside there, Mama Guy and them, Rohan Sinanan. You know, one reporter asked me yesterday in the press conference, the reporter said, well, MP, do you think is that the minister does not understand what needs to be done? And I said, I think the minister has a disconnect with intelligence. The minister has a disconnect with any semblance of formal education. Because you cannot tell me that somebody who has any kind of education or any kind of experience to run a government will have $15 million in hand and you do not know what to do with it. $15 million in hand, but $63 million jumping up in Balize House. And that is where their focus is when we tell you about friends, financiers, and family of the People's National Movement. That is where their focus is. Their focus is not helping you. And therefore, when those people in Faizabad and Mayaro have to sit down with flood waters in their homes, I saw in one constituency, a man, for 3 months, his home was surrounded by 5 feet of flood water. The UNC is not saying this. This is the reality that exists in Trinidad and Tobago. And that is why we tell you tonight, you probably get the government that you deserve. It is harsh. It is brutal. But when you sit down on your home on election day, and you refuse to go to the polls, and you do not understand that when your party is in opposition, that we cannot deliver goods and services to you, then understand that election has consequences. Yesterday when I told you that a leaked report of the business model that has moved from TNTech to the Regulated Industries Commission, is set to increase your electricity rates, domestic rates by 65%, commercial rates by 130%. By the first quarter of 2023, that is what you can expect in the new year. People cannot afford to buy groceries in the supermarket. People cannot afford to pay their rents. I often ask myself, where the hell they're getting the money now to pay these increased water and electricity rates? Where? People cannot survive. You know, there was a time when we used to say, things getting bad. Things not getting bad. Things are damn bad in Trinidad and Tobago. So stop saying things getting bad. Things are bad. What are you waiting for? In the first quarter of 2023, you will see the increase in electricity rates. Then water rates are to come. The Regulated Industries Commission that determines these new rates, I have called on them. They must hold their hand. They must not stand in the gap and think that they are independent, because we know that they are not independent. The Regulated Industries Commission, the commissioners, are appointed by the Cabinet of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. They do the bidding of the Cabinet. The Cabinet informs the policy in terms of the criteria that will be utilized by the Regulated Industries Commission to determine the new rates. So don't come to tell us that you are all independent. You are following the dictate of those lunatics that sit inside of the Cabinet, those lazy lunatics. Brothers and sisters, in the first quarter of next year, when the Regulated Industries Commission, they go out for these public consultations, because there's a three-pronged approach, and this is set out in the law. First, Tiantek and WASA must send them a business plan, which we understand has already happened. Tiantek and WASA will then look at the business plan and evaluate the new rates. But the third criteria before they put the new rates into effect is that they must hold these public consultations, and I have already sounded warning to the Regulated Industries Commission. When we look at the recurrent expenditure in the last budget, they have budgeted zero for hosting of conferences, etc., which will encompass these public consultations. We will not accept that the Regulated Industries Commission will tell you, send them emails and put suggestion box in public spaces, and so we will not accept that. You must find your voice. You must find the fire in your belly to go outside and tell them on the outside there that you are not in a position to pay these increase in electricity and water rates. You must lift your voices when Carl Mimbert can sit down in a chair and laugh at you and tell you, I've raised gas prices 3 times and you ain't riot yet. Will you allow it to happen for a 4th time when you have the opportunity to go outside there and register your disgust and your dissatisfaction with this government? I have called for the government to say, and Damien spoke a little bit about it tonight, about the subsidy. I have told you before that NGC sells natural gas to TNTech at a subsidized cost. The subcommittee of energy in the cabinet, they determine the price that NGC will sell the natural gas to TNTech. And that will form part of the criteria in terms of the information that the RIC, the Regulated Industries Commission, will look at. Up to now in that leaked report, not one minister of government, not one damn dog is barking inside that cabinet besides Keith Rowley, and that is why they are all so quiet. But they will not say whether or not their intention is to remove the subsidy in whole or in part, which means that if government removes the subsidy that NGC sells the natural gas to TNTech at, then you, the consumer, face the brunt of the burden. You have to face the challenge of absorbing that cost. I told you yesterday at the press conference how we arrived at $2 billion in debt. They are trying to pick your pocket so that they could make money inside of TNTech and WASA, when they're the reason why TNTech and WASA is in the position that they're in today. TNTech has a debt of $2 billion. When we left them in 2015, there was no debt between NGC and TNTech. How did we arrive after 8 years of Keith Rowley and the PNM of $2 billion in debt between NGC and TNTech? You know how? When we get those budget books, if they want to buy a piece of paper inside of public utilities, they have to have a line item. And MP Indar Singh and others will tell you, when we look at it from 2016 till today, every year, bet your bottom dollar, WASA and TNTech are owed millions and billions of dollars owing through the ministries and state enterprises to TNTech and WASA. They have ran the state enterprises in the public utility sector into the ground. We have seen what has happened to TSCT. Today we are seeing what is happening to TNTech and WASA. WASA employees better watch their tail, because when Kamala Prasad-Bissessar told you in the budget debate that 4,000 of you were going home, that is the next big mark to bust in this country. And once more, as Damian Lyder told you tonight, we told you so. The ball is now in your court. You must determine whether or not this is the country that you want to continue living in. Whether you will continue to sit down and say nothing with your hands on your lips because you are afraid of Keith Rowley. All those armchair politicians that the political leader speaks about, all those who write in the newspaper, they have not one word to say about a prime minister, a sitting prime minister who cannot get more than 10,000 votes in his own party's internal election. After 3 days of voting, not 1, not 2, 3 days of voting. And listen, they were up and down all different parts of the country, paying people to come out to vote. When MP Michelle Benjamin tells you why they were able to register 546 delegates from the constituency of Maruga Tableland, she might also tell you how much they were paying people on the ground. Well, in local parlance, we say it's banga season, right? But it's also Christmas. So we tell people here what? If you're getting it, take it! Take it! But in the next rounds, you will continue to vote them out in Maruga Tableland. And that trend will continue in not only Maruga Tableland, but Tunapuna, St. Joseph, Tokos and Rani. Every nook and cranny of this country must register their hate and disgust at what the PNM has done to our beloved country. Brothers and sisters, I thank you. We look forward to speaking with you on another occasion. And if I do not see you before December 25th, I will do like Saddam Hussein and tell you, HYMC, have yourself a Merry Christmas.
Revolution. People crying out for justice. Some of them crying out for freedom. Want freedom. Everybody crying out for democracy. Now it's time to take a stand.
Thank you, Barry. Well, you all know why he's called the Peppermouth now. Listen, December 10th, MP Padarath said it. The ball is now in your court. December 10th, we start in Labre, Palo Seco, We want 100,000 people. The ball is in your court. The electricity rates, the water rates, the fuel price, and they can laugh and say, well, we ain't riot yet. We want 100,000 people on December 10th. Trinidad and Tobago, how much more will you take? The UNC cannot do it alone. Damian and Anil can't jump on boats alone. We have to make our voices heard. This is for you. This is for your children. This is for your children's future. Put placards on your gate. Put placards on your car. Rowley and PNM must go. And we will not wait any longer. We will not wait a year, 2 years, 3 years. Call elections now. December 10th. Come out in your numbers. We want a fresh elections. Rowley must call elections now. Brothers and sisters, The honorable political leader could not be here with us tonight as she continues to deal with urgent matters affecting her constituency. That is what UNC was built upon, service to people. After that, MP Rudranath Indarsingh, a dedicated parliamentarian and a stalwart of the labor movement, will be our final speaker. Thank you, and just like MP, if we don't see you again, have yourself a wonderful season.
This is the revolution, the people's revolution. This is the revolution. I want to hear everybody sing. Everybody sing freedom. Man and woman sing freedom. Everybody sing freedom. Everybody sing.
Thank you very much, my brothers and sisters of the United National Congress. You would have seen a snapshot of our very committed political leader, the Honorable Kamla Persad-Bissessar, out in her constituency and leading from the front in terms of serving the people of Siparia and by extension Trinidad and Tobago. My colleagues on this virtual platform here tonight, my brothers and sisters of our great party at all levels, Trinidad and Tobago is down a precipice, and you are being told by a Prime Minister that he is leading from the front. He attempts to hoodwink you by attempting to convince you that he and his government is out in the fields and they are connecting with you, the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And only Saturday last, the Newsday had a headline entitled Ghost Prime Minister. Well, I want to tell you here tonight that the Prime Minister and his entire cabinet has been a ghost government to you over the last 7 into 8 years. They have hoodwinked you. They have deceived you. They have lied to you. They have acted in the most contemptuous and arrogant manner, and nothing will change into their 8th year of government. It will only change when an election is called in Trinidad and Tobago. And when that election is called, you must not only condemn Keith Rowley, you must ensure that the PNM is voted out of office. And Kamla Persad-Bissessar and the United National Congress is the next government of Trinidad and Tobago, my brothers and sisters, because he and his ministers of government over the last 24 hours have found their voices. They have now been telling you that they have been leading from the front. They were only in the field after 5 days of pain and suffering in Bamboo and Sawa South and St. Augustine South and throughout the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago. My brothers and sisters, so when Keith Rowley tells you that he is leading from the front and he will not respond to the UNC and he will leave flood politics to Kamla Persad-Bissessar and members of parliament who are connected with the people on the ground, Tonight I want to tell Rowley it is not about flood politics. It is about the real politics, and it is about being connected to the people throughout the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago. And if you want to understand the flood politics of the PNM, ask Khadija Amin, the MP for St. Augustine, why there was no CPEP, why there was no fire services, why there was no defense force personnel, why there was no government official in St. Augustine South, when if you walk across the southern main road from St. Augustine South, you could take less than 1 minute and you're in Real Spring in Valsayn, and there's the army, there's the fire services, there's CPEP, there's Noel Garcia. Noel Garcia can't tell the country how long again will it take to repair the red house and the leaking roof. He cannot tell the country how much it will cost the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago in terms of having misspent $421 million of taxpayers' money, but he could find himself in Real Spring, Valsayn, speaking to citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. We have no problem with citizens getting help, but the flood politics of the PNM is to go where their supporters are and where there is genuine need for other citizens and taxpayers of this country to get help. They tell you that it is about flood politics. We know that the politics of the PNM is one of discrimination and inequity throughout the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago. So tonight, Keith Rowley, I want to tell you, we in the UNC understand the politics of the PNM in terms of your discrimination that has been meted out to this country since 1956 under successive prime ministers and leaders of the PNM. That is the track record of the PNM, my brothers and sisters. And I want to tell Rowley that you are indeed a failed leader. It take them 3 days. They had to pull people, they had to drag people, they had to pay people to Balizak, to the convention in the Queen's Park, Savannah. And imagine in 3 days, that's why they put it over 3 days, because they know in 1 day, they couldn't even get 8,000 plus people to vote for Rowley. So they drag it out. They had to telephone, they had to pay, they had to transport, and they had to beg people. And that is why today they're boasting, what? 8,000 votes after 3 days. So if they don't have confidence in you, in the PNM, you want we, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, to have confidence in you? No, Rowley, no way. And we in the UNC will continue our march on you and your incompetent cabinet until you all are voted out of office, my brothers and sisters. And tonight, you must understand that you are not connected with the people. In fact, I want to quote the Express newspapers and an editorial that termed Rowley as leading a government that is woefully unresponsive, bereft of empathy, missing in action. His government is disconnected from the real life of the country. This was the conclusion of not Kamla Prasad Bisesa. This was not the conclusion of the UNC. This is the conclusion of the Express newspapers. And I go on to quote, over and over, the government keeps revealing itself as out of touch and out of step with the need of the people it was elected to govern. This is the Newsday editorial, my brothers and sisters. And yesterday, Rowley took the safe avenue of speaking to the party faithful to pronounce and make pot shots, and I will deal with him tonight. Because the sign of a dictator is when they cut off the lines of communicating with you in a very transparent and open manner. And one of the symbols of a failed administration is its lack of direct communication with the people. When last, you can answer for me in this room here tonight, when last have you seen Rowley's government holding a post-cabinet press conference and other media conferences? I ask you, when last, every Thursday, the meeting, and have they communicated the decisions of the cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago, my brothers and sisters? And that is the sign of a dictator. And I want to tell you, because they will want you to believe, you would have heard it from my colleague Barry Padarat here tonight. They want you to believe that the infrastructural collapse, the drainage problems arrived at our doorstep because of climate change and rainfall. They don't want you to believe that is their incompetence, the lack of political will to deliver to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And the figures will tell you very clear that in 2022, $91.9 million was allocated by the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago based on their budget for flood mitigation, for irrigation, for clearing of water courses, for dealing with existing flood pumps and so on. But out of $91.9 million, only $17.6 million was spent. And I want you to listen very carefully here tonight, my brothers and sisters, to a gentleman by the name of Professor Emeritus Winston Sweet, a lecturer out of the University of the West Indies. Go to the Guardian. Embarrassing did fabricate this here tonight. Yesterday's Guardian, page 5, the 4th of December, who lectured Winston Sweet, Professor Sweet, who lectured in the area of infrastructure and development at UWI. And I quote him, "It is obvious that they did not do routine maintenance that should have been done every year in preparation for the rainy season, even though when it was done, it was not enough. This applies from Mayaro to Port of Spain, and we will have to raise the road paving in some areas. This is a disaster waiting to happen, my brothers and sisters. And this is the situation that we have found ourselves in because of the incompetence of a prime minister and the incompetence of a cabinet that cannot deliver to you in terms of infrastructural development over the last 8 years. And this is why bridges, roads, drainage, everything has collapsed under Keith Rowley, my brothers and sisters. And the important thing that must be asked tonight, because they have come to you now and they have said that they have earmarked $40 million for a national flood relief program, $100 million for road rehabilitation and landslip repairs, and $10 million for agricultural relief, my brothers and sisters of Trinidad and Tobago. I want you to listen very carefully and do some analysis. How did they come up with these figures? because when I asked the Prime Minister in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, under Prime Minister's questions on the 11th of November, I asked him how many homes were impacted, how many persons were impacted, how many roads collapsed, how many bridges collapsed. The Prime Minister could not have provided those figures for the people of this country. And if you were leading from the front, Keith Rowley, you would have provided those statistics to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Up till now, you cannot come out of hiding and tell the people how many roads, how many bridges, and how many homes and citizens have been impacted by the flood and the damage that have been caused by your incompetence. And when they tell you $40 million in flood relief, I want to tell you here tonight, we will not trust them because their legacy is one of announcements, one of public relations, and they fail to deliver, they fail to implement. They only believe in propaganda, and you must not fall for their propaganda, because there are people in this country in 2022, we are on the verge of 2023, who are still waiting on their flood grants from the flood of 2018, my brothers and sisters. And that is why I will tell you, we must be vigilant to ensure that this $40 million do not end up in the hands of party-bearing supporters of the People's National Movement. We will not rest, my brothers and sisters. How they arrive at $100 million when they cannot tell you how much roads and bridges have been impacted. I am no engineer, but to restore the Manzanilla Road, that may alone cost $100 million. This is $1 billion. This is billions of dollars in damages based on what we have been seeing, what we have analyzed from the point of view of the United National Congress, my brothers and sisters. How they did arrive at this sum of $100 million. And then they want to tell the farming community that they will give $10 million for flood relief. The waters have receded. Who did this assessment? They have 3 ministers in the Ministry of Agriculture. Kazem Hussein, a fellow by the name of Nigel De Freitas, and another one I hear his claim to fame is to manage some goat farm in Tobago. That is his claim to fame. And we do not know how they have come up that there is only $10 million for flood relief for the farming community. My brothers and sisters of Trinidad and Tobago, ask yourself, and we do not trust them because in the past, the PNM have insulted the farming community by distributing checks to the value of $27 and $35 to farmers. Never forget the track record of the PNM. You cannot trust Rowley and his bunch. All I could tell you is that the United National Congress will remain vigilant because we will keep an eye and make them account in the parliament of this country, because that $150 million, we are fearful it could end up in the campaign coffers for a local government election, or it could be diverted to the refurbishment of Balizé House, my brothers and sisters. That is why we will remain vigilant in terms of keeping our eyes on Rowley and his expenditure. And then he goes in his address at the convention to tell you that he ordered $260 million for healthcare workers. And it was marketed as a gift. I want you to understand. And today, If you ask every healthcare worker in this country, they will tell you that they are confused. They do not know how this bonus was calculated, how it was paid. In fact, my sources in the Trinidad and Tobago Registered Nurses Association and the Public Services Association, they have told me that the healthcare workers have lost confidence in Rowley, the Minister of Health and the Minister of Finance and the Cabinet, because they feel they have been lied to, they have been deceived, and they have been betrayed by a government that continues to deceive the working class of Trinidad and Tobago on all fronts. And you may ask why? Because this bonus was paid on their basic salary, and it is now subject to 25% in tax. So when Rowley tells you, do the maths, that is $260 million, imagine they give you 3/4 of a gift and they take back quarter in taxes. That is the legacy of Rowley and his government. So if you do the maths, it is, if they take back 25% in taxes, it is over $65 million they have taken back from the healthcare workers when healthcare workers was looking for full benefit based on the sacrifices that they would have made. And then they tell you that they are a government that cares about the poor people in Trinidad and Tobago. Imagine this government has presided over the job loss of 150,000 persons and growing. Food prices have gone through the roof. Tomatoes is now retailing at $30 a pound. So, Councillor Taxi will tell you, Gangaram Gopal and Rajbal, tomatoes shoka is now off the table throughout the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago. Baigan is retailing at $30 a pound. Pumpkin at $12 a pound. Sweet potato at $8. Pimento is $1 for one. Pepper is $4 for $5. And Rowley telling you, boasting to the PNM party faithful, that he cares about poor people in Trinidad and Tobago. The reality is, after 7 years of Rowley in being in the Prime Minister and into his 8th year as the government of Trinidad and Tobago, families are struggling to make ends meet. Parents are putting smaller portions on the table. Parents are missing meals in order to feed their children. That is the reality of Rowley-nomics over the last 8 years, my brothers and sisters. And he wants to speak about daycare, about poor people. And then they want to inflict a property tax. And you would have heard from my colleague Barry Padarat here tonight that there is a proposal for TNTech to increase your electricity rates by increasing your existing rates by between 40 to 66% over a 5-year period. What that means is your $100 bill could go as much as $165. Your $500 electricity bill can go to $825, and your $1,000 electricity bill will now increase to $1,650. And Rowley will tell you yesterday in the PNM's convention that the PNM care about poor people. That is the legacy, that is the road they want to take you down. And he will not tell you the thousands that they have lined up to dismiss at WASA, at TNTech, at Lake Asphalt, and in the public service at the local government level. And Rowley wants to tell you that he cares about poor people, my brothers and sisters. And then he has the audacity to tell you at that convention, I will not fire Hines. He is brazen. He is bold-faced. And that is why I want you to pay very close attention. These are the signs of a dictator. Trinidad and Tobago is on the record as having achieved the highest murder rate in our country since our political independence. Central Trinidad is no longer safe. Yesterday it was a double murder in Factory Road in Couva North. Today it is a double murder in Rivulet Road in Couva South. Today no one is safe throughout the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago. And Rowley will tell you at that party convention that he has full confidence in Hines as the Minister of National Security. Rowley, tonight, I no longer focusing on Hines. I am focusing on you. You are the head of the National Security Council of Trinidad and Tobago. And that is why you must not continue to suppress the democracy of this country. If you feel you and your government, you all are winning the war on crime, don't be a coward and postpone elections as you have done with the local government elections. Do not suppress the democracy of the people and the political will of the people, because last week Thursday, the entire country went up into a euphoria because social media was a buzz. There was joy. There was unity in this country because everyone felt that you had dismissed the most incompetent Minister of National Security in the person of Fitzgerald Hines. And tonight I want to tell you, as the head of this government and the head of the National Security Council, if you are so bold-faced to tell us that you are not firing Hines after a record number of murders and homicides in Trinidad and Tobago, and this entire country is now a killing field, if your name man seek a fresh mandate from the people of Trinidad and Tobago as it relates to your handling and your government's handling of crime, give the people of Trinidad and Tobago the political right to tell you whether they have confidence in you as the head of the National Security Council and whether the electorate has confidence in you in terms of your government's handling of crime. Do not hide behind the signs of a dictator and suppress the democracy of this country. I call upon you to ensure that the voice of the people is the voice of God. And let us go manos in seeking a fresh mandate in terms of whether you have the right to govern the people of Trinidad and Tobago, my brothers and sisters. Because we must understand in this country, we must understand that it is chalk and cheese in terms of the leadership that you have given to Trinidad and Tobago over the last 8 years. When Kamla Persad-Bissessar was the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, it was one of people-centered development and unparalleled and unprecedented delivery in terms of people-centered development, focusing on improving your standard of living and quality of life. And you saw delivery throughout the length and breadth of this country, my brothers and sisters. And today, I ask you, Prime Minister Rowley, if you are leading us from the front, why have we crossed 566 murders in Trinidad and Tobago. If you are leading us from the front, why 150,000 persons have lost their jobs? If you are leading us from the front, why $400 million of taxpayers' money were lost in your government trying to fix Atlantic Train 1? If you are leading us from the front, why young persons such as Andrea Barrett, Ashanti Riley, and young Christopher Mohammed were killed, Prime Minister? If you are leading us from the front, why was Petrotrain shut down by Prime Minister? If you are leading us from the front, Prime Minister, why did it take over 9 months to start a commission of inquiry into the horrifying deaths of Faisal Kurban, Kazim Ali Jr., Yusuf Henry, and Rishi Nagesa, Prime Minister? Certainly, if you was leading us from the front, Prime Minister, why are we facing a national crisis and fiasco after 8 years? Not a scanner is functioning within the ports of Trinidad and Tobago, whilst guns, ammunition, and high-powered rifles are flowing throughout the streets of Trinidad and Tobago like a dose of salt, Prime Minister. And tonight, I want to end by telling you and referring to the book of Matthew, chapter 7, verse 16. It tells us, "Ye shall know them by their fruit. Every good tree bringeth good fruit, and every corrupt tree bringeth forth evil fruit." If this government were a tree, it would be a picker plant, dry, of no use, and causing us real pain, my brothers and sisters. I want to tell you here tonight that the writing is on the wall, Keith Rowley. You could run, but you cannot hide. Whenever the elections are called in Trinidad and Tobago, you will be voted out on all fronts. You and the most incompetent government will be rejected throughout the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago. And Trinidad and Tobago will be restored with a leader that has a feel and connection with the people, who understands the pain and suffering of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and who will be on the ground in restoring the good governance and a good government to Trinidad and Tobago. Long live Kamala Prasad Bisasa. Long live the rank and file of the United National Congress, as we look forward to brighter days under the United National Congress. I thank you.
So who feel the black? Who feel the white? I don't know. But it's settled tomorrow night. Who feel the wrong? Who feel the right? Come and go. And all who feel the too bright, let me jump up, let me wind up, party non-stop. Ramaje dingo leke kete, we come to play mass. Every creed and class, don't learn and pass. Like a ready TV, all the love inside away. Uptown and ghetto, feeling the tempo. So current so, it's party day like so. Soon as we land, fun is the plan. We like the jam, like the man bam. Waving we hand inside the band, we inside the band. And if you cut me, you go see blood. And if you squeeze me, you go feel the love. We are